I had this conversation very briefly with Clive. I think I said to him, "What the f did you do?" And he said, I have no idea. I didn't know I was doing it. Hellraiser has, without question, made an indelible mark on horror.
Back in the 80s, when Hellraiser first appeared, it was kind of a revolution in the horror genre. Up until that point, horror franchises and horror movies were pretty one-dimensional, where it was clear who the bad guys are, who the monsters are, what their motivations are, and why they exist in the first place. Hellraiser took that concept and kind of turned it around on its head and introduced villains or antagonists of the franchise whose motivations were not as clear and one-dimensional as before.
Horror in Hellraiser differs from other types of horror mostly in tone and philosophy. You know, it's about this fusion between sexuality, pain, pleasure. So you could say it's essentially like a transcendence gone wrong. Desires taken beyond flesh or beyond morality.
The ideas in Hellraiser are, you know, they are big, complicated ideas. Love, life, death, and the whole damn thing.
Horror games are very, known for violence and gore. So when we were making our game, we tried to find what is the thing that makes us different. So when we were designing the violence, the gameplay, it was always like, make it as unsettling and disturbing as possible. We didn't want to have gore for the sake of gore. We wanted always to have something to balance it out. So when we had a lot of maybe, dead bodies or something very grotesque, we always placed it with something beautiful.
Hellraiser features many different puzzles. Some of them are pretty horrific and shocking. For example, the labyrinth puzzles, they feature traps which are made of spiky and grungy metal material, and if the player is not careful, they can easily fall into these kinds of traps. Some of these are more psychological. For example, in the labyrinth there are many interesting scenes where we dabble into some of the more creepy subjects, such as drug abuse or suicide. And while they are controversial, they were integral to our story.
So players will face different types of enemies in the game. We kind of split them in two main groups. One are human enemies, that's basically the Scarlet Church. It's a cult that kind of worships the Labyrinth Leviathan. They are your like basic human enemies. They use weapons, all kind of weapons, tactics, and like human behavior when fighting the players. On the other hand, we have the unworthy, as we call them. Those are kind of outcasts of the labyrinth, the people that failed Cenobite tests and didn't ascend to Cenobites. They are drawn to Genesis configuration and they will swarm the players from time to time and attack them, and you kind of have to deal with them differently. One of the game systems that really emphasize our brand of horror is dismemberment of enemies. Players will be able to dismember enemies, even will be required sometimes to dismember them, to defeat them, by using different type of weapons, melee weapons, rage weapons, or even abilities.
Working on this game for so long, I don't think anything scares me that much, but definitely there are parts of the game that disgusts and disturbs me, and I'm actually proud of that. I believe we created some moments and experiences in the game that are so unsettling that most of our team are still disturbed to look at that and don't want to look at that.
I discovered something about myself while doing the research about all of the discomforting and horrific types of horror. I suffer from something called trypophobia. It's a condition where you get sick by looking at clusters of holes or bumps or like patterns, basically. So I discovered that about myself.
So when we are designing it, we always ask each other, like, is this enough? Is it too vanilla? Do we want to bring it to another level? So we say, okay, let's push the limits. And then when it finally comes to the players' hands and we look at their reactions, they get really shocked and disturbed by them. And we say, oh, maybe we went too far. That said, there are scenes in the game which will push some of the buttons to many players, maybe me included. Yeah, maybe there are like moments where the story takes darker turns, and yeah, I wouldn't say they scare me, but they get me thinking in a kind of a philosophical way.
I think a lot of us process some things, but of course, like working on a game like Hellraiser, it doesn't allow you to remove everything. There's still some stuff that will shock or disgust me. I don't think you ever become truly desensitized to that stuff. You just, working on a game like Hellraiser, I think, come to understand yourself a little bit better. So there's a lot that's discomforting about the horror of Hellraiser, and I think that makes it very distinct compared to its contemporaries that were primarily trying to terrify or make audiences scream, you know, that sort of thing.
This is going to be one of the rare opportunities where you can play and have the agency in something which is so involved in violence and sex, and to take a central role in mixing those two worlds, which seem very touchy and difficult to mix correctly.
PlayStation